Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining me today. My name is Sarah Davis, and I'm with the Illinois State Museum. Today we're at the Research and Collection Center to learn a little bit more about some of the animals that we find here in Illinois. So I want you to take a minute, take a look at the friend behind me. What do you think he is? If you guessed deer, you are correct. This is a white-tailed deer, and he is the state mammal of Illinois. So we're going to learn a little bit more about him, what he eats, where he lives, and some other really cool things about him. So white-tailed deer are mainly found in the forest habitat because they can find everything they need to eat and places to hide, their shelter, water. It's all found there in the forest. But they have adapted to also live in farmland and in urban areas too, because they can find the food that they need there as well. In farmlands, they eat the corn and the beans that are left behind by the farmers. In urban areas, they like to eat the grass and the plants in your backyard. You might even have seen them in your backyard trying to eat the plants out of your flower garden. One of the cool things about them and how they got their name, white-tailed deer, is that the underside of their tail is white. And when a deer gets scared or senses that there's a predator or something that's going to come after them, they'll stick up their tail and you'll see the white underside, and it'll let the other deer know in the area that there is something out there that they might want to run away from. So it kind of acts as a warning flag to the other deer. And if you ever want to see a deer, you're most likely to see it in the early morning when the sun is just coming up, or in the early evening when the sun is going down. That's when the deer are most active, and they're typically looking for food and moving from one place to another. So speaking of food, something very cool that deer have, or they have, their stomach has 4 chambers. So people's stomach only has 1. It's just one big chamber in its stomach, but a deer has 4. And that's because when they eat food and they're out and they're in the forest, they eat it real quickly. So they find the bush or the tree that they're going to eat the leaves on, and they just munch all the leaves off really quickly and they move on. And then later on during the day when they're taking a rest or they're napping, it moves through the different chambers of their stomach, and then they do a loud burp, and that food comes back up, and they chew it again and swallow it, and that's what we call cud. So it allows them to eat really quickly, and then when they have time to relax a little more, they can burp it back up, and kind of helps it move through their digestive system. So now we're going to move on from food and stomachs, and we're going to take a look at these big guys that are on either side of his head. And these are the deer's antlers. Antlers are only found on male deer. Female deer don't have them. The bigger the antlers, the older the deer, and they measure the antler size by the number of points that you find on the antlers. And something else that's cool about antlers is when they first start growing out of the deer in the spring, it has something called a skin on it that's kind of fluffy and fuzzy. It's called velvet. And that velvet, if it gets scratched or a little dented, it'll actually bleed, just like you and I bleed, but it doesn't really hurt the deer, and it scabs over, and when they shed the velvet, as you move into late spring and summer, it just kind of falls off like a scab. The male deer will shed their antlers in the wintertime, and then they regrow them every spring. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the coat, the fur of the deer. So we have 2 pelts here in front of me, and this first pelt is its summer coat. So in the summertime, their coat is going to be darker, and that's so that they can camouflage or blend in to the surroundings of the forest, because there's all the leaves and everything, and so they need to be able to hide a little better amongst them to keep away from predators and other things that might want to eat them. But in the wintertime, you will see deer with lighter coat, and that's so that they can blend in and camouflage into the snow that you might be having in the forest or even in the farmland or in your backyard. Something else that's cool about their fur is that they have 2 layers. They have an outer coat, and that outer coat is hollow and coarser. So it's not as dense as the undercoat is softer and a little denser that helps them keep warm. Because unlike you and I, deer don't wear coats in the winter or clothes to keep them warm. They have to rely on the different layers of their fur. So thank you for joining me today, and I hope you learned a little bit more about our state mammal, the white-tailed deer.